Hello, good afternoon. We will start. This is the last one, so it's already after. Les vacances. Okay, so as we have done since the beginning, you realize we took pretext of this exhibition of Emily Carr to review some of, I would say, basic concept in aesthetic. The concept of beautiful, of sublime, and you remember the uncanny also. And so, of course, it was not just about Emily Carr. I have to really to reveal the secret tonight. And I took pretext of it to deal with certain ideas and things. And today I want to explore one of the last aspect that I've not touched yet. It is this idea that maybe we could go through beauty, to beauty through geometry, and especially with the geometric abstraction. As you know, some abstract painter were attracted by a geometric form, and that's why I want to speak a little bit of Molinari at the end of this lecture, because it's a good example of this type of fascination for straight lines and hard edge and everything, and color. And of course, the problem now is what it has to do with Emily Carr. Because the, the problem is the following. It is, of course, because of her involvement with, especially at the beginning of her career, with these Indian subjects, and that she wanted to paint really what she saw. She had even this idea that she was working for history. You see, all these things were disappearing, and they have to be fixed on paper, they have to be photographed, and to keep kind of memorial of all this manifestation of art among the native people. And because of this strong orientation, you could say, well, it's hopeless, there's nothing to do with this theme of geometry with Emily Carr. But there is, nevertheless, there's a fact. In 1927, you have a big change in her style. As if, first of all, these subject matter are no more exclusive like before. And indeed, as you have seen some of the stuff that I showed you before, especially the view of forest and the view of sky and things like that, she have integrated kind of new way to paint. And the question it is, okay, what happened in 1927 that have suddenly changed her outlook so much? And from there you will see the answer, of course, the first answer is to go to our biography, to try to see exactly what happened. You remember last time I showed you a few views of this big exhibition of Western art, native and modern, in 1927. And of course, she was invited to the opening of this show. After all, she has 36 paintings in this show, plus the rugs and the pottery that I showed you. And so she was the best represented artist in that show. So that's why a little bit normal that in Ottawa they tried to attract her and to have her at least at the opening. So that was, let's see, the circumstances that would bring her in the East. So she got the free pass on CN, and from Vancouver, she crossed all over Canada in train, of course, at the time. I guess there was no question to go by plane. And she had this idea before going to meet one of the members of the group of 7 who was called Fred Varley. Varley was living in Vancouver. He was teaching there, and she met him probably just because she knew that she will meet these people going east, and she wanted to know a little bit about them. He probably recommended her to read Fred Hauser's book on the group of 7, and I thought probably she brought it with her on the train. And since it's very exciting when you go out of Vancouver in train, but when you come in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, it becomes a little bit more boring. Let's say, strictly nothing to see for hours and hours. It's an experience to do, to travel by train through Canada. It's something that you don't forget. And so she brought this book, and she got excited by what she saw there. And one of the reproduction in the book was this relatively well-known painting of Lauren Harris, above Lake Superior, which is at the Art Gallery of Ontario now in Toronto. And she saw it that way, black and white, without rather not very well reproduced, let's say, like they did at the time. And, but nevertheless, she was excited by what she saw there. And she mentioned, let's say, she described this painting, she took a diary all that time, so we can follow her quite precisely. You see, day by day, what she saw and what she did, and she noted her reaction, habitually quite bluntly. And but for this, she was very enthusiastic, and she says, "It have an austere, formal picture of great depth and dignity." And she was, of course, very excited to meet or Harris or anybody of this group of 7 to see what they paint and how it can be done. She arrived, so she was going toward Ottawa from Vancouver, and she decided to stop in Toronto to meet these people because, of course, they were basically working in Toronto, or when they were not in the wilds here and there, but let's say their main studio was there. And she got invited to visit them in the famous studio building. This building was built by the money of Harris. You know that he come from the Massey Harris family, these guys who have all the tractor of Canada, I think. And so Harris never had problem of money. He always was very over these problems. And with him and with Dr. McCallum, who was another kind of mécène for the group, they decided to build this building on 7th Street in Toronto, where each member of the group could have a studio. Yeah? And so that's where she's invited first. And she saw first A.Y. Jackson, yeah? The more close to Quebec of the group, let's say, because Jackson was, after all, a Montrealer, and he have worked a lot in the east of Canada, in Quebec, especially in Charlevoix and all this region. But what she saw there struck her as a little bit embarrassing in a way, because he was in his studio with a group of students, and like she says, pouring tea to everybody. In those days, they were not drinking anything else than tea, I guess, in studio, in artist studio. Today, it could be a little bit different. And she saw some of these pictures that he did the year before on Indian theme. What happened, it is that Barbeau wanted to imply most of the artists that he could to go to the West and to paint as much as possible the scene from the North and the West in order to create interest for this region, even touristic interest, I would say. And he brought Jackson and others to the Skeena River on the north of BC, if you want, of British Columbia, and he helped them to meet a different group of Indians. And from that trip, let's say, Jackson made a few sketches and then some painting in her studio. And when she visited him, these were the painting around that was hanging on the wall or leaning near the floor. And she notes she was a little bit taken aback by this. I feel a little as if beaten at my own game, she says, because of course this was her theme. This was, and his Indian picture have something mine lack. Rhythm, poetry, mine are so downright. I work for history and cold facts. As if, right away, by the confrontation with this type of painting, she began to put in question her own realist impulse, I would say, what I was describing before, her leaning toward realism, because she says, I want cold fact, I want history, I want not to interpret too much. But then she realized that you could be freer, especially these paintings of Jackson are very free about the motif. For instance, we know that there was no totem pole in this village, and the mountain was elsewhere and everything. So you really combine few things like that to make it looking nice, you know. And so it's a painting. It's not cold fact and history, of course. So she, anyway, it went well, and she made her little note. And each day like this, she go back to another room in the Severn building to see other painter. The second one she saw was Lismer. And Lismer is an Englishman, nice guy, teacher. He was teaching here in the Musée des Beaux-Arts for a long time. And he didn't have, she says, he didn't have much painting on the wall. I don't know if she saw that one in particular, but it's a possibility. Why? Because this is a painting that Lismer did just a year before. He was in Charlevoix-Comté and with Marius Barbeau, and because Barbeau have two loves, the Indians and the French-Canadian folk culture, let's say. And so he brought this painter also in Charlevoix and says, yeah, look, it's fantastic. It's so authentic and all that. You should paint here too. And so Lismer went with Jackson and Marius Barbeau, and they make a trip like this all over Charlevoix. And he brought back this painting from there, which is a depiction of a little village which is called Saint-Hilarion. Saint-Hilarion is not really on the river. It's like inside of, more inside of the land. And the little village with the typically with the church in the middle. And if you look above the spire, you will see that he created a kind of halo. And he was attacked by some stupid critics about this because they said this is not natural. At least he said, I just wanted to make the vibration of the air, you know, to give an impression of that. And probably in the contrary, for Émile Carr, this was a nice aspect of this painting, so that some freedom about what you see and creating an effect like this. The other member of the group that she saw also is, of course, MacDonald. And she's a little bit severe about MacDonald. She says, Mr. MacDonald's canvas were big and fine, lovely design, and sometime good color. Not very nice. At other time, I found them a little hot and heavy and earthy. And it's true. With MacDonald, you have very often this feeling of a hot color like this, too much brown, too much of this. I enjoy them greatly, but without thrill. They wake few emotion in me. The Tangle Garden I like about the best. And the Tangle Garden, of course, is this painting, which is very famous of MacDonald. It was bought 10 years after a visit in 1937 by the National Gallery, so she could see it in his studio. Of course, she was not, the painting was not sold at that moment. And finally, of course, of all the group, the one she really wanted to see is Harris. And she went to see him, also in the same circumstances. Here I found a little photo on the internet of Harris about the time when she met him, 1926, 1927. So that's how he looked at the time, always with big tuft of hair like this, who became whiter and whiter with time. But there he was a relatively young man, let's see. And then she saw, of course, the same painting that was reproduced in Hauser book, but she saw it for real. She saw it in color and as it is. And then she was very, very impressed by her visit with Harris. She was accompanied by two women in all these encounters. One was Bess Hauser. This is, like she says, the wife of the book. So this is the wife of Mr. Fred Hauser, the author of the book on the Group of Seven, and who will become later the wife, l'ami de cœur, let's say, of Harris. And so she was really in good hand in a way. And the other, she mentioned a Miss Buell. I don't know who she is, I don't know. But she says that when she saw the painting of Harris on the wall in his studio, she was completely like a dumbfounded fool. She cannot speak. She was speechless. And she says Mrs. Buell saved the situation because she spoke a lot during that time, and she could just look. And then you will see the way she described the impact of this painting on her show that she didn't dare to speak of Harris like she did of the others. She said exactly the opposite. I said, it went up right to the very core of my soul, as if really she was impressed by it. Harris was a revelation, a getting outside of oneself and finding a new self in a place you didn't thought existed. As if this experience of you go completely out of yourself because you are so enthralled by what you see, And suddenly you discover that it's something in you, of course, that answered to that, but it's something that you never knew that existed in you. And this is kind of very, very strong. Very often the best spectator of painting are painters because they know what it's all about. And so she got in right away. And then she described the painting like giving a feeling of the vast, lovely soul of Canada. When I will give the lecture in French, I will skip this part. They plumbed to her depth, climbed her height, and floated into her spaces. Then she come back to her hotel, the Tuxedo Hotel in Toronto, and then she notes all her impression. And it's a long text, but again, you see that it's Harris who have struck her more. Oh God, what I've seen, she says, where I've been, something has spoken to the very soul of me, wonderful, mighty, not of this world. Chords ways down in my being have been touched. Dumb notes have been struck, chord of wonderful tone. Something has called out somewhere. Something in me is trying to answer. It is surging through my whole being, the wonder of it all, like a great river rushing on, dark and turbulent, and rushing and irresisting, carrying me away on its wild swirl like a helpless little bundle of wreckage. You remember when I spoke of the sublime, one of the factors I said of the sublime is the size, the quantity. And in her text, you have many words that refer to quantity. It's a might of a wonderful river, very strong and all that, and her, a little bundle of wreckage. This kind of distance between what she sees and how the way she feels. This is very typical of a reaction in front of a spectacle that you could be described as she speaks of mighty, like a great river, in the big spaces. All the words are there to go always in the same direction. Okay, after this first meeting, then I guess she calmed down a little bit, took the train again, and went to Ottawa. Because after all, that was the real aim of her trip. It was to be there at the opening of the show on Northwestern Canadian artist, native and modern. She described the opening as a kind of catastrophe. She says, when it opens, it was already closed, because what happened, there was not too many people. The rooms were empty, and as if that didn't attract too much attention, Barbeau was like really discouraged, and Brown was trying to make it fun, it's okay. And she was very mad at Brown, because Carr is very often mad at the Englishmen. When they are English, they are already a little bit low in her scale of value. So Brown, being English, of course, she put the fault on him, that it's because he didn't make the publicity or whatever. And so she was a little bit deceived by that. Nevertheless, she was there to see the exhibition, also to visit some collection of Indian art, to take motif. You remember, I said she draw things on the spot to use for her pottery or for her rugs, so she take advantage of that. And then she went to Montreal, apparently for a very, very brief period. There was the Royal Canadian Academy exhibition here in this museum. Well, at the time it was called the Art Association of Montreal. And then she see again some of the group of 7 painting. Well, there was Harris, of course, but I want to show you. There was this painting, for instance, Solemn Land, which is very famous again, of MacDonald. It's at the National Gallery now. It's a rather big painting, and it represents, of course, a kind of incredible vista of the north of the Superior Lake and all that, with these mountains and these clouds, and to make it more dramatic. And on each of these pictures that she saw in Montreal, she have little notes. For instance, she would say, it's very big and powerful and solemn. I wish she was not quite so fond of Brown, because It's true. There is a little bit of the. His design is lovely, but he has not the true movement or imagination that I want. It's true. There's not movement in this one, because in other painting of MacDonald, you do have movement because it will be waterfalls or things like that. But there, in the contrary, he wanted to show structure, to show something solemn, like he called it, solemn land. The painting of Jackson, who was there, didn't impress her at all. She said, Jackson, autumn in Algoma did not please. She doesn't say me, but it's evident. It's in bracket there. So it was thin and unconvincing and unfinished. So, and in fact, I think some of the problem of landscape painters, when they want to be as precise as he suggests here, you see the real title of this is not Autumn in Algoma. It is October Morning in Algoma. So that means he wanted to show a certain atmosphere in October, where already it's turning colder and colder, and then also early in the morning before the sun is too strong. And then, of course, maybe it looks unfinished, but probably for Jackson, this was quite all right. It was finished. There was a painting of Lismer, The Happy Islands. And on this, what did she say? I did not find the canvas restful, though there is a lot of liveliness in it. It's one of the rare painting of the group of seven where you see people in it. You see on the left, you have two, you have a couple. And this is unusual, but the way he paint them, they immerse in they are the same color in the rock and all this. They are not disturbing. They are integrated in what you see. But then there was also a painting by Harris in this show in Montreal at the RCA, what's called Mountain Forms. And I think it's interesting to see it in sequence like that, because right away you understand the impact of this type of painting can do, because they're very different from the others. The others are more close to the fact they want to show aspect of Canada, and suddenly this one is called Mountain Forms. It's not even precisely which mountain and where. We know that Harris went in the Rockies, I think since 1924 to 1930, almost every summer, he went to Jasper Park in that region, and he painted, he made drawings, and he painted after in his studio in Toronto, this view. But to call it mountain form means you have already a kind of distillation of what he saw, and to transform it in a kind of, I would say, more abstract type of painting. Okay, this one, sometimes, I says it's dated 1928, so she could not have seen it in 1927. It was done, the art historians love these type of problems, you see, of dates and things like that. Most of the people are bored by this, but, and so I said, I must find another painting that could fit the demand, like this one, well, dated more vaguely, let's see, with the same idea. So every year he went in the Rockies, and he came back with these drawings. So certainly something very similar to what you see here was presented at this exhibition in Montreal. And I think she stayed there basically a day. And she came back to Toronto by the train in the night, and went back like this, having seen the exhibition of the Royal Canadian Academy. 11th of December, she's back in Toronto, and she's dying to meet Harris again. But she's shy a little bit. She doesn't know she should bother him. So finally, she phoned him, and Harris is very grand seigneur, you know. So, okay, dear, you will come to my studio on Tuesday. And then he phoned a little bit later and said, oh, by the way, why you don't come for supper tonight? So she's, this is fantastic, exactly what she wanted. So then again, the same experience. Again, it's a painting of 1924, so it could have been on his wall or could have been in his place, but she's invited for supper at his place. And apparently, what Harris did, he had what they call at the time an orthophone. Well, it's a kind of gramophone, you know, with a big record like we used to have in bakelite. and then finally you get the music, like it's kind of Bacon style. You hear it. Anyway, but he put this record there, and with a symphony, I don't know of whom, and looking at picture in silence like that, one after the other. So it was, again, an unforgettable evening that she had with Harris. And in her diary, she knows, to sit in front of those pictures and hear that music was just about heaven. I have never felt anything like the power of those canvases. They seem to have called to me from some other world, sort of an answer to a great longing. As I came through the mountain, I longed so to cast off my earthly body and float away through the great pure spaces between the peaks, up the quiet green ravines into the high, pure, clean air. Mr. Harris has painted those very spaces, and my spirit seems able to leave my body and roam around them. They make me so happy. This is an incredible description. It's almost, technically, you have this type of feeling with people who are dying, for instance. They have the feeling that their soul detached themselves from their body, and they look from outside what is happening. It's a rare type of experience, but it exists. It's, but normally not in front of painting. In front of painting. Okay, and so she's confronted to these paintings. She described one as a sea painting, and at first I thought, okay, it could be something like that. Of course, one of the great source of inspiration of Harris was the north shore of Lake Superior. He went there often, and he felt there that you have, let's say, the essence of what Canada could be. You know that he was a very enthusiastic theosopher also. Theosophy is a kind of creed, I would say. It was defined for the first time by Mrs. Blavatsky at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And it was a kind of synthesis of all the religion that you could imagine of the world. A little bit, sometimes a little bit fuzzy. Mrs. Blavatsky was against Darwin, and she says that the monkey descends from man, not the other way around. Huh? But this have not been checked completely. And so it was this feeling that there is beyond, let's say, the organization of the world as you can see it, there is something more spiritual that we go through and that we could touch maybe by this kind of simplification of a painting. And very often you will notice in Harris' painting also, you have these rays that come from above and fall on people, as if revelation comes from above. God is there and send you his message like this, and you are just in awe in front of it. And he thought this type of landscape that we have in Canada could purify the whole America, you know. Quite a job, and will bring this fresh air, like he says, to the rest of the continent, as if it was the aim of Canadian art to create this type of image that could purify the rest of our mind. But in her diary, Carr described a precise painting. And it doesn't fit with this one, but I think it's closer to this one. I will just read you what she says. Heavenly light lay upon one corner. So if you look on the right, you could say, shining peacefully. 3 clouds forms, almost straight shaft with light in their tips pointed to it. Maybe we could see in the right-hand corner. Across blue-green sky, a long queer cloud lay lowered down, almost on the horizon, but you could move in and on and beyond it. A small purplish round island, then 4 long simple rocks form, purple-brown, with the blue sea lapping them. So that she described then the bottom of the picture. 2 warmer green earth form and some quiet gray form that might be tree trunks in the foreground. Peace. My spirit entered in the quiet space of the picture. And again, it's not exactly what we see, but it's closer to what she described, of course, and we know at least 3 or 4 of these pictures were very similar in style. So she could have seen one or the others and tried to describe what she saw. The fact that the trees there are dead is important in the outlook of Harris. It is the death of the forest that revealed the sky. When the forest disappeared, you could see the sky. So it's not for nothing that these trees are dead in the foreground, because in his point of view, the importance is always what's come from above, what is more striking like this. And then, during the evening, he tried to explain her the relation between his creed in theosophy, his belief in theosophy, and his painting. And Emile Carr is suspicious a little bit of that. It doesn't sound Christian enough, this thing. Yeah? It's a little bit mishmash of everything. And well, she listened to him carefully and all that. And she has certainly herself some spiritual interest. And she always says she speaks of God. She look for him and in nature and in this big space and all that. And not only that, but Harris suggests her to read some material. You see, Clive Bell, you should read that, his book, Art. It will be interesting for you. And Ouspensky. So, well, this was a less good idea. But anyway, the Tertium Organum is a very, very bizarre type of book in which Monsieur Ouspensky, who is a Russian theosophist, who tried to convince us that science is over and now it's spirits and everything. So it's not to put in every hand. And she tried to read it, but she didn't understand much about it. And happily, Harris told her, he said, when you finish to read it, throw it away, he says, and forget about it. And I think that's what she did. Anyway, this evening seems to have been very tremendous in her career, since she says, I guess that long talk in Lauren Harris' studio was the pivot on which turned my entire life. So when I said at the beginning that there's something happening in 1927 in the career of Emile Carr, this is it. This is this confrontation with a completely different type of painting that she was not knowing before, and in which the organization or the structure, let's say, of the world is more important than the appearance. And she reacts always the same way. With Harris, she have no problem because precisely the structure appear more clearly, and with the others, she questioned this or that, some details, that is not to her liking. So what happened in her painting after this visit? Well, it's striking. So if you see what she painted on the way back, you have a big change in her style. See, what was before was this Indian village that I show you, rather realistic and all that. Quite interesting because, after all, she did this work of documenting all these people and all that. But now suddenly she's completely in a different world. And the first feeling, when I look at this, I says, yeah, it reminds me of a famous phrase of Paul Cézanne. Cézanne was not a great theoretician, but he was bugged by young painter who wanted to know, what is your theory, Monsieur Cézanne, and all this. And so one of them was Émile Bernard. Émile Bernard was young at the time, and he visited the whole Cézanne, and they have correspondence between them. So there's in a letter of Cézanne in which he tells him the secret of his art. If you try to apply that, you will not go very far. But the idea, you will see, is interesting. I almost tempted to read that in French because how can I Cézanne in English? You say, it will not work. Permettez-moi de vous répéter ce que je vous disais ici. Traiter la nature par le cylindre, la sphère, le cône, le tout mis en perspective. Translate nature through geometric form, in fact, and the cylinder, the cone, and the sphere, and put that everything in perspective. And then he goes on saying, he says, okay, you have two axes in a painting. You have the horizontal axis, who give you the part of the world that you are painting. See, you choose, you make mentally a frame. I will paint this part of nature or this one. So this is the horizontal of your painting. It will give you the span, if you want, of your attention of what you can paint on the picture. And he says it is what the pater omnipotens, why is it, the pater omnipotens and eterne, why he used Latin there, because Émile Bernard was a very Catholic painter. He was very involved in religion and all that. So to please him, he says it's what God gave you to paint. He says you determine by this horizontal line. And then he says the perpendicular line create depth, create a kind of feeling of 3 dimension, like nature is. And he says you should control both of them, the vertical and the horizontal, and then organize your picture like that. And then he says use red and yellow, but a little bit of air, or a little bit of blue also to make us feeling the air, as if there's an atmosphere there. And the more you look at the picture of Émilie Carr, you have the impression that she more or less applied this. The trees are now like cylinder, sometimes also like cones, and she have this balance of color that was interesting, that as if all this landscape was going toward the top there, where there is some lighter part. But the approach of Cézanne is very optical. He's not very much interested in symbolism and things like that. And I think you do have that also in Émilie Carr painting. You don't have just an optic reaction to the landscape you have in front. There's a message there. There's something that, since it's dark in the bottom, let's say, and the more you go up in the painting, the more bright it is. So there's really a kind of a more mystical type of signification. And indeed, it could be maybe compared rather to a painting like this, like François-Marc, a German painter who was influenced by Cubism, evidently in this picture, in which he represents 3 deers. And when I look at it, I was looking for the third one. Okay, there's one here, there's one there, and there's one there. There's a big one. And they are a little bit like the spirit of the forest, because he put them in color who are not according to nature. And the forest becomes also very complicated, very intricate, and the colors distributed in such a way that not to be too much encircled in form. So you have the impression that these deer suddenly become like spirit in the forest, like just presence, but not real thing. And this is an interesting aspect, I think, closer in a way to what Émilie Carr wanted to do, to suggest also this kind of spiritual dimension in her painting. If we just go back to it, I will read you a description done by a great art historian called Robert Rosenblum of the François-Marc picture, but you will see it could apply a little bit here too. He says, the 3 deers deprived by Cubism of their material substance become only spiritual presences that blend mysteriously into the similarly insubstantial patterns of earth and tree. That's it. There's a kind of derealization of what we see, as if what she's all about is more the spiritual type of dimension of what she's looked. The emphatically unreal colors, again, oppose the French viewpoint of Delaunay and the other cubists, from whom they are partially derived. For these colors are intended not so much as demonstration of the artist's theoretical independence from nature, as of his desire to unveil an unseen world of divinity that could not be represented according to empirical observation. As if that's it. He wants to touch a more basic type of idea, and then, okay, the kind of strange color that's used is just a way to, not to show his control on the medium, but rather this kind of other dimension that you want to reach. Another aspect of the picture of Émilie Carr, I want to stress, it is the kind of movement that you have in it. If you go at the bottom of the picture, you have a kind of line who looks like an inverse S, as if you start from the left side. I'll use this little machine here. You start from here, and then you go And you follow like this slowly in the painting as if she was really taking you in a kind of movement. And we know, of course, at the time, especially among the Cubists and the Futurists, this idea of depicting movement was important. I would say the second generation of people who were touched by Cubism were fascinated by this idea, maybe we can represent movement. And you all have seen, of course, the famous picture of Duchamp, Nu descendant l'escalier, who was based on photograph, let's say, of not Muybridge, probably in the case of Duchamp. He may have known it because he knew so many things, but also of Jules-Étienne Maré, who was at the time also photographing like this the movement. Here, I didn't get somebody who go down a stair, but somebody who climb it, okay, with Muybridge. Well, not too far. And the idea to how to show movement here was to depict the whole, I would say, subject in different positions. So you suggest a kind of sequence in time by the very fact that you have to look from one side of the painting to the other. But what you see is a kind of fragmentation of the movement like the photo are. And this is not at all what Émilie Carr did. She suggests movement by a line, by a big, not fragmented line who goes like this and go inside of the picture and bring you like this. It's a very, very different type of analysis of the movement. Instead of fragmenting it, you suggested by a flow, by a more lifeline. The futurists have done the same thing also. This is my favorite picture of Giacomo Balla. It's called Dynamism of a Dog on Leash. Of course, the dog is a dachshund, as you can imagine. He goes like, we had a dachshund, so I know, I recognize him exactly, the type of, but again, this is the same idea like in the picture of Duchamp. Like to suggest movement, you analyze the, let's say, the movement by many states, and you put them in sequence like that. Instead of showing one big movement, let's say then you go back to Émilie Carr after that and you say, well, no, that's not her way to suggest it. She make a spiraling movement here, was very intricate and complex on the top of the picture, but with just the flow of line that you could follow. And in a way, instead of finding the movement in the objet, in the things that is represented, she put it in the gaze, in the look of the spectator, because you follow the line by your eyes, and then you create this movement. So again, so she's dealing really with a more contemporary type of problem, I would say, in this picture, and she much more explorative, let's say, than she was before. When you see after 27, you see suddenly all this new type of painting appearing. Another type of experience she will make, I think it's very important also, it is to go toward darker and darker picture. Like if you want, if you want to see more the structure, maybe sometimes color is in the way. Why? Because color could bring you to pay attention to all the little details of nature. But very often, painters who go toward black like this, or white, black and white, like Bourdieu, let's say, at the end of his life, and their need is to correspond to, they want to see more the structure of things instead of just their appearances. And this is, I think it's what's happening in some of the picture of Émilie Carr, like this one who's called Gray, and in which it's very dark like this, and maybe you have the impression the only thing that is weird there, it's in the middle of the picture, it's like an eye, as if this tree was looking at us from the side like this. Maybe it's my imagination, but I have this impression like, and then it will mean, okay, kind of mysterious presence inside of the forest. Look, she went even further than that with this painting, in which it's almost cubist, in a way. It's a forest interior, but only in black, white, and gray. And with a lot of these geometrical form, let's say, of the, like Cézanne says, the cone and the cylinder, and even with line, the straight line and all that. And what I wanted to say, to make just a little aparté here, the painters who are attracted by that habitually, I said, are suspicious of the illusion that we get from our senses. The way we perceive the world is, in fact, for them a little bit illusory. And it reminds me of a little bit of Plato philosophy. Plato also taught that the real things are ideas, are form. And that what we see in the regular life are just derivative of these forms. And he says, for instance, we cannot draw a perfect circle. But when you do geometry, you deal with perfect circle. For instance, when you say a line have only one dimension, of course, a line that you draw on the blackboard have more than one dimension. They have a certain width. But in fact, for your reasoning in geometry, you assume that this is one dimension only. And so he says, and when you get to these ideas, at that level, they are solid like forever. He said they cannot change. And it's maybe what we can achieve in terms of geometry, we could also maybe achieve in terms of ethics. If it was possible also to define what is piety, what is justice, what is in a kind of perfect way like this, and it will never move, then we will have touched this idea. I tried to stress the fascination of this type of démarche, you know, that you have in certain painter and certainly in certain philosopher. Yeah. And then I will make even more daring type of comparison with Guido Molinari. Maybe some of you have known him, and this is a good photo of him. He seems to listen, but especially to answer back. It will not be long that he will burst and he will say what he thinks. And he died recently, unfortunately, and he was certainly one of great animator. But during his career, at one point, he made an experience where darkness, let's say, or the darkness of the senses was important. And that's why I want to bring him in the picture there. It is, he says at a certain point, he was writing poetry, and he decided one night, in the middle of the night, he had an inspiration, and he wrote the poem like this without opening the lights. And in the morning, he got his piece of paper, and he said, I could not read it. It was visible, but it was illegible. I could not read what I wrote. But on the other hand, I was fascinated by the graphic aspect of what I wrote, of what was on the paper. It was like a drawing in a way. As if then you discover under the meaning of words a more basic structure with just a kind of appearance of letters. From that experience, he made another one with painting. This time, the idea was to paint à la noirceur, in the middle of the night, without looking at anything, and then Molly always liked to give a little spectacle. So he was at the School of Fine Arts here in this museum at the time, and he decided to paint with blindfolded, with the kids around. Wow, what he will do and all that. So the result are a little bit astonishing. So what happened, I tried to imagine what it is. So you have a painting in front of you, you have your tube of color, and you don't see anything. And you take a tube and you begin to, you feel, see where the painting ends with your hand. So you are allowed to do this, but you don't see what you do. And you go like this, and then with a spatula, or you begin to spread it. You touch it where it is, and then finally you feel more or less the whole surface. And then you remove your blindfold and you look at it. Wow, I got something there. So what happened there? It is an important distinction. Color suddenly become lost is what we call the connotative aspect of color. The connotative aspect of color is when you say this thing is, for instance, this chair is red or burgundy or whatever. This is the color of an object. But if you have a denotative color, not connotative, denotative, it means that it's you refer to the color itself. So as if what happened there, when you don't look and you use color, you cannot use them to refer to the color of things. You refer just as a pure color, while more or less, let's say, like in a map, for instance, it can say on a map, it's not the Canada, it's not blue or red or yellow. It's just a convention that you decide to be able to distinguish between different regions. You change the color. This usage of color is, in a way, liberate the color from its role of depicting things, of depicting nature. This is a very special type of abstraction, if you want, because then you could have, maybe I would try to explain it, but let me say it. You could have signifiers without signified. When you have a sign, let's see, a flag, it referred to something else, to the country. So you have a signifier with the flag, and you have a signified with the country. But here the color is like without signified. And she doesn't refer to anything. She just refers to itself and to her possibility of creating zone of different zone on the surface. And this is what we call a kind of non-referential abstraction, because it's an abstraction that doesn't refer to anything else except of itself. And this is very important to understand, because this is the type of abstraction that Carr or even Harris, you will see, will not go. Because they want to keep the signification. They want to keep the relation with the signified, with any symbolism, anything that the painting could refer to something else. And let's say, to illustrate that, you know that of the group of 7, the only one who went to abstraction is Harris. All the others didn't dare to go there, but Harris was going further and further in that direction, and he was finally producing this quite beautiful painting, which are in fact they are not non-referential, because what you see there, triangles, horizon, reflection of triangles, all this in fact are like geometrization of real thing. It's in the prolongation of what he was doing before. You remember I showed you mountain forms or things like that. So you go a little bit further there, a mountain form become a triangle. But there is still a little reference to the real. And with Molinari, or with younger painter of today, with this kind of abstraction, you don't have that anymore. They cut this even small relation that you still have here with nature. For instance, the fact that you have here a kind of horizon. Pardon. Where it is? Well, on the top there, you have an horizon. You have another one here, maybe the blue also. Why the blue is here instead of on the triangle? And this big triangle could be seen like a mountain. And then in the lower part, these correspond a little bit to the little islands that you saw before. See, you can relate all the details in a way to his previous painting and to say, okay, what we have here is a simplification, it's a geometrization of what we had before, but the link with nature is still there. Yeah? And I think that's exactly also, well, I will skip that, the Pythagorean and all this, but it's true that you have this relation with geometry, even in Plato and even in the Pythagorean in the antique Greek. Like geometry is the key for getting toward the more basic things in the world, in nature. And this is probably one of the most abstract painting that Émile Carr ever did, which abstract three forms. So he kept only this movement I was speaking about before. And again, the relation with the real forest is still there. It's not a non-referential painting. You understand the difference? You keep a certain link with nature. And maybe to finish with, I will just try to analyze one more painting of Molinari to show you what happened when you paint like that. The cut is definitively with any form of symbolism also. Sometimes people say what he means, what he wants to say. So it's always the look for signified something, as if that behind these bars there must be some esoteric content, or the guy is crazy and everybody can do it, and about you know the type of objection that this type of painting I've got. In fact, if you look at this one more carefully, you will see. It's difficult a little bit to describe in words, but anyway. You see, for instance, you have two blue circling a black one here. Then two green circling a black one. And then two blue again circling a red one. So you have the impression this is the center of the picture. When I say that, it's as if I was describing only signifiers. They refer to nothing except that it's band, that stripe of color. Organized in certain order. There is an order there, since he repeats this theme, two, you see, two there also. Then at the end here, you have one green and one red, and at the end here, you have only one red. This is often in picture of Molinari that you have this idea of the painting seems to announce a possible prolongation. You see, as if you continue with this, here, you will have two green around this red one. And so the painting could go on like this endlessly, if you want. And the same here, we announce that the possibility of going in the other direction, and why not, instead of having, let's say, dark, the two black here who are circled by blue or by green, that it will be the green or the blue will be in the center. And then you get another series of painting that could develop in the other direction. But then when you say that, it's like a chain of signifier without signified. And the only thing who plays, it is the difference between each of them. That means you go from one to the other. And this is very uncannily close to Lacan psychology and all that. I don't want to enter in that, but it's fascinating to see that by creating a kind of a grid like this, he touched more or less things that is very contemporary. It's very close to our modern world. At the beginning, why just to have vertical like this and not to show it differently? It was that the moment you introduce an horizontal in a painting, you create a minimum landscape. The moment you make an horizontal, you create the idea of an horizon, and you create the foreground and background. By suppressing the horizontal completely and making only a vertical, then you create a kind of flat surface in which this problem of depth and doesn't exist anymore. And the painting is affirming itself as such. The paradox of that, if you look at the date of these things, this painting happens in Quebec at a time where politically we were most nationally excited. This is la Révolution tranquille. And I said, well, with distance, normally we should have then a big return to figuration and to politic content, very explicit politic content, because after all, there was a turmoil, there was Révolution tranquille and everything, and le Parti québécois, and you have so many events of that nature that could create the need for a very different painting than this one. The only explanation I could get for why, and this was the most important painting of the 60s, in fact, Molinari, Tousignan, Gauguin, all these groups of the so-called plasticiens, they were occupying the main scene. And there was not much other, say, maybe Pierre Ayotte or people like that, a little bit of people of Graph will try to make some allusion to the political situation, but nothing as powerful and as important as that. The only explanation you could get, I think, is the fact that at that time, the poet and like Gaston Miron, and the playwright, the singers also, like les chansonniers, took in charge to express these content and liberated the painters to do what they wanted. But the message there, it's a kind of an attempt to get a world of signification, but without any cause, if you want, any political cause to defend. As if you have a pure system who could be used as you want, in a way, making beautiful painting, making kind of stunning type of painting, but without any reference to any what I would say political cause. And I think this is the main signification of this painting at that moment. It was to keep this interest in more universal type of statement. And for this, I think we could be grateful to them. And so I have to finish. If you go back to Emily Carr in comparison with this type of painting, you understand that she was more wanting to keep this relation with nature, even as far as she could go toward a more abstract type of presentation. She had this idea that still these movements, these forms, all of that are speaking to us and are important to our relationship. So I hope that you enjoyed that. You were a wonderful audience because you came rain or shine in good number. Je vais répéter cette série pour les gens qui parlent français à l'automne. Je n'ai pas encore les dates, là, mais on va reprendre. Là, évidemment, l'avantage d'avoir la série avant l'exposition d'Émilie Carr, c'était que ça vous prépare un peu à voir ce qui va se passer. Mais après, bon, on fera des réflexions un peu de l'autre genre. Puis probablement, je ne me répéterai pas exactement. Là, je vais essayer de trouver, varier un peu la sauce là, ici et là. Alors, merci beaucoup pour votre attention.